effect does word of mouth through social media have on the opening weekend of a movie? Torsten Hennig-Thurau and Caroline Witz of Cass Business School have been studying just this. Caroline, tell me, what effect do they have?
Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than to just say a big one or a small one. What we were particularly interested in was evaluative word of mouth through social media. So we kind of know already that word of mouth has a huge impact on the adoption of products in general, not just movies. What's interesting about movies is that time plays a particularly important role here. Because the opening weekend of a movie in the US, so of a widely released movie, which is a movie that's released in more than 800 theaters in the US, is hugely important to the economic success of the film overall. And until now, we as consumers, of course, could talk about, have you seen this great film? And I'm sure it's an amazing movie coming out. But we didn't really have the opportunity to talk about how good or bad a movie was throughout this really short time period, throughout these 3 days. So the question is really, now that we have Twitter and we can give status updates through Facebook very quickly to many, many people, does this actually have an effect? For example, what people say on Friday about a movie, does this impact how many people will go on the immediately following Saturday and Sunday? And this was the overall idea of the study, and I can tell you it does have an effect. Not a huge one, but the effect is definitely there.
Well, it's an effect that movie studios need to be aware of. And this is, you've got a really solid data set here. You looked at something like, was it 4.6 million tweets?
Something like that. Yeah. So we took 105 movies, which were all widely released US movies between October 2009 and October 2010. And then we looked at all tweets that were tweeted throughout the opening weekend of these movies, respectively. And this is more than 4 million tweets in total, which of course is also a lot of useless tweets, because if you have a movie called The House, you get all kinds of tweets which are about the house but not about the movie, right? So we ended up with something too close to 900,000 tweets which were actual reviews of the movie, where somebody said, I've seen this film and it was either good or bad. And this is what forms the basis of our data.
So what's the lesson for the studios here, who ultimately are businesses who are trying to make money?
The lesson is that they it's a bit tricky to say that, because for them, I think the news isn't necessarily what they want to hear. The lesson is that they have to go back to making better movies for their audiences, because they really had this little safe haven where during the opening weekend, consumers could not say very much about the quality of the movie to each other. And now they can. They can really communicate quickly and widely enough to actually impact consumer behavior the following day. So while big advertising campaigns can still guarantee the first night, the opening night of the movie, they can't guarantee the full weekend anymore, which means that they really have to go back to making movies that are actually appreciated by the audience, rather than playing on the sequels, for example, that we've just, for example, one great example is Prometheus, which was, it was by some at least awaited, by others not so much, and the critical acclaim is very limited, right? Opinions are very divided about Prometheus. It had a decent opening weekend, but it wasn't the success that the studios had hoped for. And an even worse example is John Carter, which was an absolute disaster, right? The Disney movie. So I think there is already this notion in the industry that something has changed. And more concretely, what we also see is that studios are experimenting more with how they're releasing the movies. So the big US release is not the only model anymore, which is also quite interesting. I see where we have more releases that start actually overseas, in Asia and in Europe, or exclusively in IMAX theaters, etc., to get people to talk about the movie, ideally positively. But in order to do that, you must have a lot of faith in the quality of your product.
Caroline Witz, thank you very much.